I turned my key in the lock at 3:47 p.m. and it wouldn't budge. For 20 years, that door had opened for me. 20 years of mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance premiums. 20 years of calling this place home. I'm 53 years old, and I've survived a cheating husband, a bankruptcy that wasn't my fault, and the kind of loneliness that makes you question whether you did something wrong just by existing. But nothing prepared me for the sound of my own son's voice through that wooden door, telling me I didn't belong here anymore. The brass handle felt cold under my palm, and I remember thinking how strange it was that something so familiar could suddenly feel like a stranger's property. I rang the doorbell, twice. Then I knocked, softly at first, then harder. My grocery bag sat at my feet, the frozen vegetables probably already starting to thaw in the afternoon heat. I could hear movement inside, footsteps, whispers. Then the door cracked open, just wide enough for me to see Daniel's face. My son, my only child. The boy I'd rocked through colic and walked through his first day of kindergarten and helped move into his college dorm. Except he wasn't that boy anymore. He was 31 now, and the expression on his face was one I'd never seen before. Cold, decided. "Mom, you can't come in." "What are you talking about? This is my house." "No." He stepped into the doorway, blocking it with his body. Behind him, I could see Melissa, his wife of 3 years, her arms crossed over her chest. "This is our house now. You need to leave." The world tilted. I actually reached out and touched the doorframe to steady myself because my legs suddenly felt like they couldn't hold my weight. A car drove past on the street behind me, and I heard children laughing somewhere in the distance, and everything felt surreal, like I'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. "Daniel, I don't understand. Let me inside. We can talk about whatever this is." "There's nothing to talk about." His voice was firm, rehearsed even. "You've been living here rent-free for too long. Melissa and I have been patient, but we need our space. We're starting a family. You're going to have to find somewhere else to go." Rent-free. The words hit me like a slap. I'd paid for this house, every single payment. Even when Daniel moved back in 2 years ago, claiming he and Melissa needed help getting on their feet, I'd never asked them for a dime. I'd welcomed them, cooked their meals, done their laundry, treated Melissa like the daughter I never had. And now I was being told I'd been living here rent-free. "I own this house," I said, my voice shaking. "Daniel, what's gotten into you? Is this Melissa? Did she put you up to this?" Melissa appeared beside him then, her hand on his shoulder. "Don't blame me because you can't accept reality, Karen. Daniel's been supporting you for years. This house is in his name now. The paperwork went through last month. You signed it yourself." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I never signed anything." "You did," Daniel said. "Remember when I had you sign those papers for the refinancing to get a better rate? That's when we transferred the deed." My mind raced back. 6 weeks ago. Daniel had come home excited, talking about interest rates and monthly savings. He'd spread papers across the kitchen table, pointing to signature lines, telling me it was just a formality. I'd trusted him. Of course I'd trusted him. He was my son. The only family I had left after my parents died, and my ex-husband disappeared into his new life in Arizona with a woman 15 years younger than me. "You tricked me." "I did what I had to do," Daniel said. "Now please, don't make this harder than it has to be. Get out." The door closed. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. The new deadbolt. The one I hadn't installed. I stood there on the porch I'd swept 1,000 times, staring at the wreath I'd hung last Christmas, still there in April because I'd liked the way it looked. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold my purse. I let it drop. Then I picked it up. Then I dropped it again. A woman jogging past looked at me with concern, but didn't stop. I must have looked insane. I felt insane. I drove to a motel 6 miles away. The Sleepy Time Inn, with its flickering neon sign and parking lot full of trucks. I paid for one night with my credit card, which had a limit of $3,000 and a balance of $2,700. The room smelled like cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner. The bedspread had a burn hole near the pillow. I sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the wall until the light outside the window faded to dark. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too shocked to cry. Too busy replaying every conversation I'd had with Daniel over the past 6 months, looking for the signs I'd missed. Had he been planning this all along? Or had Melissa convinced him? She'd always been ambitious. She'd always wanted more. I'd seen the way she looked at the house, calculating its value. The neighborhood had gotten expensive. Gentrification, they called it. Young couples moving in, renovating, flipping. My little 3-bedroom ranch was probably worth $400,000 now, maybe more. Daniel and Melissa could sell it and walk away with enough money to start their new life, their life without me. At 9:22 p.m., my phone rang. It was my neighbor, Patricia. She'd seen me standing on the porch earlier. She wanted to know if I was okay. I told her I was fine, just a misunderstanding with Daniel. I'd be back tomorrow to sort it out. She didn't sound convinced, but she didn't push. We'd been neighbors for 18 years. She'd watched Daniel grow up. She knew him as the sweet kid who mowed her lawn every summer for $20. She probably couldn't imagine him capable of what he'd just done. I couldn't imagine it either. I didn't sleep. I lay in that motel bed and listened to the sounds of people fighting in the room next door, the rumble of trucks on the highway, the drip of a faucet I couldn't quite turn off all the way. I thought about my mother. She'd died when I was 35, and one of the last things she'd said to me was that family would always be there when everything else fell apart. I'd believed her. I'd raised Daniel with that same belief. Family first. Always. And now here I was, locked out of my own home by the person I'd loved most in this world. Morning came too bright and too fast. I showered in the tiny motel bathroom, using the thin bar of soap and the shampoo that smelled like fake flowers. I put on the same clothes from yesterday because I hadn't thought to grab anything when I left. My suitcase was still in my closet. My closet in the house I couldn't enter. I looked at myself in the mirror. 53, gray roots showing through the blonde dye job I'd gotten 3 weeks ago, lines around my eyes that seemed deeper than they'd been the day before. I looked old, tired, defeated. But I wasn't defeated. Not yet. I drove back to the house at 7:15 a.m. Daniel's car was in the driveway. So was Melissa's. I parked on the street and walked up the path, noticing for the first time that the tulips I'd planted last fall were blooming, red and yellow, bright against the mulch. I'd spent an afternoon on my knees, digging holes, spacing them just right. I'd imagined Daniel and Melissa admiring them, maybe even thanking me. Now I wondered if they'd rip them out, replace them with something more modern, more theirs. I knocked, waited, knocked again. The door opened, but only as far as the chain lock allowed. Daniel's face appeared in the gap. "Mom, I told you yesterday you can't be here. I need my things, my clothes, my documents. You can't keep me from my own property." "It's not your property anymore." "Then it's my property inside the property. Let me in, Daniel, please." He hesitated. I saw the flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or doubt. But then Melissa's voice came from behind him, sharp and decisive. "Call the police if she doesn't leave." "You're going to have the police remove your own mother?" I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. "If you don't leave right now, yes." Daniel's jaw was set. He meant it. I stepped back, put my hands up in surrender. "Fine, but this isn't over. You know that, right? This isn't legal. You can't steal someone's house." "I didn't steal anything. You gave it to me." The door closed again. I stood there, breathing hard, my heart hammering in my chest. An elderly man walking his dog across the street was watching me. I turned and walked back to my car, trying to hold my head high, trying not to look like a woman who'd just lost everything. I drove to the library. I needed internet, and I needed a place to think. The librarian, a young woman with purple streaks in her hair, showed me to a computer. I sat down and typed into the search bar, "How to fight a fraudulent property transfer." Then, "Can someone steal your house by making you sign papers?" Then, "Legal help for elder fraud." Elder fraud. The words stung. I wasn't elderly. I was 53. But the articles that came up all seemed to apply to me. Stories of adult children manipulating aging parents, forging signatures, exploiting trust. There were phone numbers, hotlines, legal aid services. I wrote them all down on the back of a receipt I found in my purse. The first number I called was for a legal aid office downtown. The woman who answered sounded tired but kind. I explained my situation. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sighed. "Ma'am, I'm sorry this happened to you. We see cases like this more often than you'd think. The first thing you need to do is get copies of any documents you signed. Request them from the county recorder's office. See exactly what you agreed to." "But I didn't agree to transfer my house. He told me it was a refinancing." "That may be fraud, but you'll need to prove it. Do you have any witnesses? Anyone who was there when you signed?" I thought back. Daniel had brought the papers home on a Tuesday evening. We'd been alone in the kitchen. Melissa had been at work. No witnesses. No, it was just me and him. That makes it harder, but not impossible. Get those documents. Then come see us. We can evaluate your case and see if we can help. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called the county recorder's office. They told me I could request copies of the deed transfer online or in person. In person would be faster. I could come today. I said I'd be there within the hour. The county building was gray and imposing, with marble floors that echoed when you walked. I found the recorder's office on the 3rd floor and stood in line behind a man in a suit and a woman holding a baby. When my turn came, I approached the counter and told the clerk what I needed. She typed something into her computer, frowning at the screen. "That property was transferred 5 weeks ago. I can print the documents for you. There's a $5 fee per page." "How many pages?" "Looks like 8. $40. I handed over 2 20s and waited while she printed. When she handed me the stack, I flipped through it right there at the counter. My signature was on 3 different pages. Bold, clear, undeniably mine. But the document wasn't a refinancing agreement. It was a quitclaim deed. I'd signed over all rights to the property to Daniel James Morrison, my son. No money exchanged, no conditions, just a transfer, pure and simple. My hands started shaking again. I walked to a bench in the hallway and sat down hard. I read every page, twice. The notary's stamp was there, the notary's signature. I didn't recognize the name. I'd never met this person, but apparently they'd witnessed me sign away my house. I took out my phone and called Daniel. It went straight to voicemail. I called again, same thing. I sent a text. "We need to talk. This isn't right. You know it isn't right." No response. I called Melissa. She answered on the 3rd ring. "What do you want, Karen?" "I want to know how you live with yourself, how you convinced my son to steal from me." "Steal?" She laughed. It was a cold sound. "You signed the papers. You gave us the house. If you're having regrets now, that's not our problem." "I thought I was signing refinancing papers. Then you should have read them more carefully." "Where's Daniel? Why won't he talk to me?" "He doesn't want to talk to you. You're being dramatic and making this harder than it needs to be. Just move on, Karen. Find an apartment, get a job, live your life. Stop trying to mooch off your son." Mooch. That word again. As if I hadn't spent 31 years raising him. As if I hadn't used my divorce settlement to buy that house so he'd have stability after his father left. As if I hadn't worked double shifts at the hospital for 15 years, coming home with aching feet and an aching back so he could have braces and a car and college tuition. "Put Daniel on the phone." "No." She hung up. I sat on that bench for 20 minutes, staring at the papers in my hands. People walked past me. A couple arguing about parking tickets. A lawyer in an expensive suit talking on his phone. A janitor pushing a mop bucket. Normal people doing normal things. And here I was, homeless, holding proof of my own dispossession. I thought about calling the police. But what would I say? I'd signed the papers. My signature was right there. Maybe I'd been tricked, but how do you prove someone lied to you? How do you prove intent? I needed help. Real help. I couldn't do this alone. I drove across town to the legal aid office. The building was small and shabby, sandwiched between a pawn shop and a check-cashing place. Inside, the waiting room was full. A mother with 3 small children, an old man with a cane, a young couple holding hands, both of them looking terrified. I signed in at the desk and took a seat. The receptionist told me it might be a 2-hour wait. I said I'd wait as long as it took. 3 hours later, a woman in her 40s called my name. She introduced herself as Ruth, a paralegal. We sat in a small office with walls so thin I could hear the conversation happening in the next room. I handed her the deed transfer documents and told her everything. She listened, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and studied me. "This is definitely suspicious. The fact that he misrepresented what you were signing could constitute fraud. But here's the problem. You're going to need evidence beyond your word against his. Do you have anything in writing? Texts? Emails? Anything where he talks about refinancing?" I pulled up my text messages with Daniel. There were dozens, most of them mundane. Grocery lists, dinner plans. But then I found one from 7 weeks ago. Daniel had texted me, "Mom, I found a great refinancing option. Could save us $300 a month. I'll bring the papers home for you to sign." I showed Ruth. She nodded slowly. "That's good. That's something. But it's not definitive. A lawyer representing your son could argue that the conversation shifted, that you agreed to the transfer later. Do you have anything else?" I scrolled further. Nothing. Most of our conversations had been in person, casual, over dinner or while watching TV. "There's a notary signature on these documents," Ruth said. "But you don't remember meeting a notary?" "No. Daniel told me his friend from work was a notary. He said she'd come by the house, but I don't remember anyone coming by." "Then we need to track down this notary. See if she actually witnessed your signature, or if she just stamped the document as a favor to your son. If she never met you, that's fraud. That's something we can use." For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt a flicker of hope. "So I can get my house back?" "Maybe. It won't be easy, and it won't be fast. These cases can take months, even years. But you have a shot. The first step is filing a complaint with the district attorney's office. Fraud is a crime. If they investigate and find evidence, they could press charges. I don't want to press charges against my son." Ruth's expression softened. "I understand. But if you want your house back, you may not have a choice. Fraud cases get taken more seriously when there's criminal involvement. It puts pressure on the other side to settle." I left the office with a folder full of forms and instructions. File a police report, request an investigation, gather any additional evidence, document everything. I felt overwhelmed and exhausted, but also strangely energized. I had a plan now. I had steps to take. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was fighting back. I went back to the motel. I couldn't afford to keep staying there. At $65 a night, I'd burn through what little savings I had in a couple of weeks. I needed something more permanent. I opened my laptop and searched for cheap apartments. Studio, 1 bedroom, anything under $800 a month. The options were grim. Dingy places in bad neighborhoods. Buildings with reviews complaining about roaches and broken locks and landlords who didn't fix anything. I thought about calling my cousin in Ohio. We hadn't spoken in 5 years, not since a disagreement at my mother's funeral. But maybe she'd let me stay for a while, just until I got back on my feet. I drafted a text 3 times and deleted it each time. Pride, stupid pride, but also fear. Fear that she'd say no. Fear that everyone would say no. That I'd end up on the street, just another statistic, another cautionary tale. At 6:38 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Mom, you need to stop harassing us. Melissa is pregnant. You're stressing her out. If you keep this up, we'll get a restraining order." Pregnant. Melissa was pregnant. I stared at the words, trying to feel something. I should have been happy. I was going to be a grandmother. But all I felt was a deep, hollow ache. I'd never get to hold that baby, never get to watch Daniel become a father. They'd written me out of their story. I was a problem to be solved, not a mother to be loved. I typed a response. "Congratulations. I hope you'll both be very happy in the house I bought you." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "You didn't buy us anything. Stop playing the victim." I turned off my phone. I couldn't look at it anymore. The next morning, I went to the police station. I waited in another lobby, this one full of people dealing with car accidents and noise complaints. When it was my turn, I was taken to a small room and interviewed by a detective named Harris. He was in his 50s, with gray hair and a kind face. I told him everything. He wrote it all down in a notebook, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "And you're sure you didn't understand what you were signing?" "I'm sure. He told me it was for refinancing. He lied." "Do you have that in writing, the part where he said it was for refinancing?" I showed him the text. He photographed it with his phone. "Okay, this is helpful. I'll open a case. We'll start by interviewing the notary. If she confirms she never met you, that's a clear violation. Notaries are required to witness signatures in person. If she didn't, she broke the law. And if your son knew she didn't, he's complicit in fraud." "How long will this take?" "Investigations like this can take weeks or months. It depends on how cooperative everyone is. In the meantime, I'd advise you to consult with a civil attorney. You may need to file a lawsuit to get your property back. The criminal case can help, but it's not a guarantee." I thanked him and left. As I walked to my car, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. Months, maybe years. I couldn't stay in a motel that long. I couldn't afford it. I needed somewhere to live. Fast. I drove to the Salvation Army. I'd heard they helped people in crisis. The woman at the front desk gave me a list of emergency housing resources, shelters, transitional programs. Most of them had wait lists. Most of them required proof of income. I didn't have proof of income. I'd been living off savings and a small pension from my years working at the hospital. It was enough to cover bills when I owned my house outright. It wasn't enough to cover rent and food and everything else. I sat in my car outside the Salvation Army and cried for the first time since this started. Big, ugly sobs that made my chest hurt. I cried for the house I'd lost, for the son who'd betrayed me, for the life I'd thought I was building, for the loneliness that had been my constant companion for so many years and now felt like it might swallow me whole. A woman knocked on my window. I looked up, startled. She was young, maybe 30, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She gestured for me to roll down the window. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I'm fine." My voice was hoarse. "You don't look fine. Do you need help?" Something about the genuine concern in her eyes broke me. I told her everything. Right there in the parking lot, I spilled my entire story to a stranger. She listened, nodding, occasionally handing me tissues from a pack she had in her purse. "That's awful," she said when I finished. "But you know what? You're going to get through this. You're going to fight, and you're going to win. I can tell." "How can you tell?" "Because you're still here. You're still trying. A lot of people would have given up by now." Her name was Simone. She was a social worker at a nonprofit that helped people navigate housing crises. She gave me her card and told me to call her. She said her organization might be able to help me find temporary housing while I sorted out the legal mess. She also mentioned something called a legal clinic, a free service where law students helped people with civil cases. It met every Thursday evening at the community college. I thanked her. I actually hugged her, this stranger who'd shown me more kindness in 10 minutes than my own son had shown me in a week. I went to the legal clinic that Thursday. It was held in a small classroom with fluorescent lights and a whiteboard covered in equations from an earlier math class. There were 6 law students, all of them eager and serious. I met with one named Marcus, a tall young man with glasses and a gentle demeanor. I handed him all my documents. He read through them carefully, occasionally making notes. "This is a solid case," he said finally. "The text message helps a lot. It shows intent to deceive, and if the notary didn't actually witness your signature, that's illegal. We can argue the deed transfer is void." "Can I get my house back?" "Possibly, but it's going to be a fight. Your son has possession right now, and possession is a powerful thing in property law. We'll need to file a lawsuit to quiet title. That means asking a judge to declare the transfer invalid and restore your ownership. It'll take time. And money, even with free legal help. There are filing fees, court costs. How much? A few $1,000s probably, maybe more if it drags out. I didn't have a few $1,000s. I barely had a few hundred, but I nodded. Okay, what do I do first? Marcus helped me draft a complaint. We spent 2 hours going over every detail, making sure the language was precise. He explained that we'd file in civil court and request an emergency hearing to address my immediate housing situation. We'd argue that I'd been fraudulently dispossessed and needed to be allowed back into the home while the case proceeded. It was a long shot, he admitted. Judges were reluctant to overturn property transfers without clear evidence, but it was worth trying. I left the clinic feeling cautiously optimistic. For the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. There were people willing to help me, people who believed me. That night, I stayed with Simone. She'd offered when I mentioned I was running out of money for the motel. She had a small apartment with a couch that pulled out into a bed. It wasn't comfortable, but it was free, and it was warm, and Simone made me tea and sat with me while I cried again. "You're going to be okay," she kept saying. "I promise. You're going to be okay." I wanted to believe her. The next Monday, we filed the lawsuit. Marcus had recruited one of his professors, a real attorney, to officially represent me pro bono. Her name was Linda, and she was sharp and no-nonsense. She filed the complaint and requested an emergency hearing. The judge scheduled it for 2 weeks out. 2 weeks of waiting. 2 weeks of living on Simone's couch and trying not to feel like a burden. During those 2 weeks, Detective Harris called. He'd interviewed the notary. Her name was Jessica Phelps, and she worked at a real estate office across town. She admitted, under questioning, that she'd never met me. Daniel had brought the papers to her already signed and asked her to notarize them as a favor. She'd done it without thinking, she claimed. She didn't realize it was illegal. She was apologetic and scared. She'd violated her notary commission, and she could lose her license. "That's good news for you," Detective Harris said. "It proves the document was improperly notarized. We're moving forward with a fraud investigation. Your son will be contacted for an interview." "Will he go to jail?" "Probably not. Most fraud cases, especially family disputes, don't result in jail time. But he could face charges, and it strengthens your civil case." I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that the truth was coming out. Sadness that it had come to this, that my son, the person I loved more than anyone in the world, was being investigated for a crime against me. The emergency hearing was on a Friday morning. I dressed in the one professional outfit I owned, a black pantsuit I'd bought for a job interview 3 years ago. Linda met me outside the courthouse. She briefed me on what to expect. The hearing would be short. We'd present our evidence. Daniel and his attorney would present theirs. The judge would make a ruling. Daniel was already inside when we entered the courtroom. He sat at a table with a lawyer in an expensive suit. Melissa was beside him, her hand on her stomach. Protective, possessive. Daniel didn't look at me. He stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, called the case. Linda stood and presented our argument. She showed the text message. She presented Detective Harris's report about the notary. She argued that I'd been fraudulently induced to sign the deed and that the transfer should be voided pending a full trial. Daniel's attorney stood and countered. He argued that I'd signed the document willingly, that the text message didn't prove fraud, only a conversation about refinancing that later evolved into a different arrangement. He claimed I was a disgruntled parent trying to manipulate the legal system because I regretted my decision. The judge listened to both sides. Then she asked me to testify. I stood and walked to the witness stand. My legs felt shaky, but I made it. The judge asked me to describe what happened. I told her everything, trying to keep my voice steady, trying not to cry. When I finished, she asked Daniel's attorney if he wanted to cross-examine me. He did. He asked me pointed questions. Had I read the document before signing? Had anyone forced me to sign? Had I ever asked Daniel to clarify what I was signing? I admitted I hadn't read it carefully. I admitted I'd trusted my son. I admitted I hadn't asked questions because I never thought I needed to. The attorney pounced on that. So you're asking this court to believe that you signed a legal document transferring your house without reading it, and now you want to undo that decision because you regret it? I didn't regret it, I said, my voice breaking. I was lied to. The judge banged her gavel. That's enough. I've heard enough. She paused, looking at both of us. This is a complicated case. There's evidence of deception, but there's also evidence of a valid signature. I'm not going to make a final ruling today. However, I am going to issue a temporary order. Mrs. Morrison, you are allowed to return to the property and retrieve your personal belongings. Mr. Morrison, you are not to interfere with that process. As for the ownership dispute, we'll resolve that at trial. I'm setting a date for 3 months from now. 3 months. I could get my things, but I couldn't move back in. I still had nowhere to live. I walked out of the courthouse feeling hollow. Linda tried to reassure me. This is good, she said. The judge didn't dismiss your case. That means she thinks you have a legitimate claim. We just have to be patient. Patient. I'd been patient my whole life. I was tired of being patient. That afternoon, with Linda and a police officer present, I went back to the house. Daniel and Melissa watched from the porch as I packed my clothes, my photos, my mother's jewelry, my books. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching the walls, the furniture, the little things I'd collected over 20 years. This had been my home, my safe place, and now I was packing it into boxes like I was moving out of a storage unit. Daniel never said a word. He just watched, his face unreadable. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to beg him to explain why he'd done this. But I didn't. I kept packing. I kept moving. And when I was done, I loaded everything into Simone's car and drove away without looking back. The weeks blurred together after that. I stayed with Simone. I applied for jobs, but no one wanted to hire a 53-year-old woman with a gap in her work history. I applied for apartments, but landlords wanted proof of income I didn't have. I went to the legal clinic every Thursday. I met with Linda every other week. The trial date loomed in the distance like a finish line I wasn't sure I'd ever reach. And then, 6 weeks after the emergency hearing, my phone rang at 11:04 a.m. It was Daniel. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mom. His voice was panicked, desperate. Mom, I need your help. What's wrong? The bank took everything, the house, our savings, everything. Melissa's freaking out. I don't know what to do. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What are you talking about? I took out a loan against the house to start a business. It didn't work out. I couldn't make the payments. They foreclosed. We have 30 days to get out. I sat down slowly. You took out a loan on my house. It's not your house anymore, Mom. It's mine. Or it was. Now it's the bank's. And you want me to help you. Please, I know I screwed up, but we don't have anywhere to go. Melissa's pregnant. We need... I hung up. My hand was shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I stared at it, waiting for him to call back. He didn't. Instead, a text came through. Mom, please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't respond. I sat on Simone's couch and stared at the wall, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than pain or fear. I felt nothing, just a cold, empty nothing where my love for my son used to be. Simone came home an hour later and found me like that. She sat beside me and waited until I was ready to talk. When I finally told her what Daniel had said, she shook her head in disbelief. He lost the house. He lost the house, I repeated. The house I paid for. The house he stole from me. He gambled it away on some business scheme, and now it's gone. What are you going to do? I looked at her. I'm going to fight. Not for the house. That's gone. But I'm going to make sure everyone knows what he did. I'm going to make sure there's a record, so that baby he's about to have will grow up knowing exactly who his father is. Simone squeezed my hand. Good, she said. That night, I called Linda and told her what happened. She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, This changes things. If the house is in foreclosure, we need to act fast. We might be able to negotiate with the bank. Argue that the original transfer was fraudulent, which means the loan Daniel took out was based on fraudulent ownership. The bank won't want that liability. They might be willing to settle. Settle how? Give you a portion of whatever they recover from the sale. It won't be everything, but it'll be something, and it'll be on record that you were wronged. Something. After everything, I'd get something. Not justice, not my home, but something. It wasn't enough. But maybe it would have to be. The next morning, Linda filed an emergency motion to intervene in the foreclosure proceedings, and for the first time since I'd turned my key in that lock and found it wouldn't open, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't going to lose everything after all. The foreclosure notice arrived 3 days later. I heard the mailman's footsteps on Simone's porch at 2:17 p.m., the familiar squeak of the mailbox lid, the thud of envelopes hitting the metal bottom. Simone brought it to me, a thick packet from the bank. Official, final, 30 days to vacate, except it wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Daniel James Morrison, current occupant of the property I'd paid for, the property he'd stolen and then lost. Linda filed the emergency motion that same afternoon. I sat in her office while she typed, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She explained the strategy. We'd argue that the loan Daniel took out was based on fraudulent ownership, that the bank had a duty to verify the chain of title, that I was the rightful owner and should have been notified before any loan was issued. It was a long shot. Banks had deep pockets and good lawyers, but it was the only shot I had. The hearing is in 10 days, Linda said. We'll be in front of Judge Brennan. She's fair but tough. She doesn't like people wasting her time. We need to be prepared. I spent those 10 days gathering every scrap of evidence I could find. Old mortgage statements showing my payments, utility bills in my name, photos of me in the house over the years, birthday parties, holidays, my life documented in Kodak moments and digital files. Marcus helped me organize everything into a binder, color-coded tabs, chronological order, professional. Daniel called twice more. I didn't answer. He left voicemails. The first one was angry, accusing me of sabotaging him. The second was pleading, begging me to drop the lawsuit, saying Melissa was having complications with the pregnancy, saying they had nowhere to go, saying I was being cruel. I deleted both without listening all the way through. Detective Harris called on day 7. The district attorney had decided to file charges: fraud, forgery, notary violations. Daniel would be arraigned next month. He could face up to 3 years in prison if convicted. Harris said it almost gently, like he knew what it meant to hear your child might go to jail. "How do you feel about that?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. And it was true. I didn't know. Part of me wanted justice, wanted Daniel to face consequences. Part of me still wanted to protect him, still wanted to be his mother. The two parts warred inside me constantly. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Simone worried. She made me soup I couldn't taste and sat with me in silence when I couldn't talk. The hearing was on a Tuesday morning. I wore the same black pantsuit. Linda wore navy blue. We met outside the courthouse at 8:45 a.m., going over our strategy one last time. The bank's attorney was already inside, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a briefcase that probably cost more than my car. Daniel and Melissa sat on the opposite side of the gallery. Melissa's stomach was showing now. 5 months along, maybe 6. She looked exhausted. Daniel looked worse, thin, pale, defeated. Judge Brennan entered, and we all stood. She was younger than I expected, maybe 50. Sharp eyes behind rimless glasses. She called the case and told us to proceed. Linda stood and presented our argument. She walked through the timeline, my purchase of the house, my mortgage payments, the text message where Daniel mentioned refinancing, the fraudulent deed transfer, the improper notarization, the loan Daniel took out without my knowledge, the foreclosure that resulted. Your Honor, Mrs. Morrison is the victim here. She was fraudulently dispossessed of her property, and now that property is being foreclosed upon because of actions taken by someone who had no legal right to encumber it with debt. We're asking the court to void the loan and restore Mrs. Morrison's ownership." The bank's attorney stood. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Your Honor, the bank acted in good faith. We verified the deed on record. Daniel Morrison was the legal owner at the time the loan was issued. Whatever dispute exists between him and his mother regarding how that transfer occurred is between them. The bank is an innocent third party. We have a right to foreclose on a loan that wasn't repaid. Voiding it would set a dangerous precedent." Judge Brennan leaned back in her chair. "Counsel, if the deed transfer was fraudulent, then your client's loan was issued to someone who didn't actually own the property. That's not good faith. That's negligence." "With respect, Your Honor, the deed was properly recorded. We had no reason to suspect fraud. Except that the notary has admitted she never met Mrs. Morrison. That's in the record. Your client could have caught that if they'd done proper due diligence." The attorney shifted. "The notary's admission came after the loan was issued. We couldn't have known at the time." Judge Brennan turned to Linda. "Do you have evidence that Mrs. Morrison tried to alert the bank to the fraud before the loan was finalized?" Linda hesitated. "No, Your Honor. Mrs. Morrison didn't know about the loan until after it was in default. So she didn't notify the bank. She didn't know there was anything to notify them about. She was locked out of her own home. She was filing legal actions to get it back. The bank should have discovered the ongoing dispute." Judge Brennan looked at me. "Mrs. Morrison, did you ever try to contact the bank directly to tell them what happened?" I stood. "No, Your Honor. I didn't know they were involved until my son told me about the foreclosure." She frowned, made a note. Then she looked at Daniel. "Mr. Morrison, do you want to say anything?" Daniel stood slowly. Melissa gripped his hand. "Your Honor, I made a mistake. I thought I was doing the right thing. My mom was struggling financially. I thought if I took ownership, I could manage things better. The loan was supposed to save us. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "You told your mother she was signing refinancing papers when she was actually signing a quitclaim deed. Is that correct?" Daniel's face flushed. "I may have misrepresented what the papers were, but she signed them willingly. She trusted me." "You exploited that trust." "I was trying to help." Judge Brennan's expression hardened. "By lying? By forging a notarization? By taking out a loan on property you fraudulently acquired and then defaulting? That's not help, Mr. Morrison. That's theft." Melissa started crying. Soft, hiccuping sobs. Daniel put his arm around her. "Your Honor, my wife is pregnant. We have nowhere to go. If you void the loan, we lose everything." "You already lost everything. You gambled with your mother's house and lost. That's on you." The judge paused, looked at all of us. "Here's what I'm going to do. I'm not voiding the loan outright, but I am ordering the bank to halt foreclosure proceedings pending a full trial on the fraud claims. If Mrs. Morrison can prove at trial that the deed transfer was fraudulent, then the loan will be voided and she'll regain ownership. If she can't prove it, the foreclosure proceeds. Fair?" Linda nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." The bank's attorney looked less pleased but didn't argue. "Trial is set for 8 weeks from today. In the meantime, Mr. Morrison, you and your wife will continue to occupy the property, but you will pay rent to the court in an amount equal to what the mortgage payment would have been. Those funds will be held in escrow. If Mrs. Morrison prevails, she gets the money. If the bank prevails, they get it. Understood?" Daniel nodded miserably. "Good. We're adjourned." I walked out of the courtroom feeling lighter than I had in months. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was progress. Linda squeezed my shoulder. "We're in good shape. The judge is on your side. Now we just need to win at trial." 8 weeks. I could do 8 weeks. I spent those weeks preparing. Linda and Marcus helped me refine my testimony. We practiced questions and answers. We anticipated what Daniel's attorney would ask. We built our case document by document, witness by witness. Detective Harris agreed to testify about the notary fraud. Jessica Phelps, the notary herself, agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. She'd admit she never met me, that Daniel had pressured her, that she'd made a terrible mistake. Simone helped too. She connected me with a therapist who specialized in family trauma. I went twice a week, talked about Daniel, about my ex-husband, about the loneliness and the betrayal and the guilt I felt for not seeing this coming. The therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Reyes, told me I wasn't responsible for Daniel's choices, that I'd done my best, that healing would take time but was possible. I started sleeping better, eating better. I even applied for a part-time job at a local clinic doing administrative work. They hired me. 20 hours a week at $14 an hour. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was independence. It was proof I could survive without the house, without Daniel, without any of it. 3 weeks before the trial, something unexpected happened. Patricia, my old neighbor, called. She'd heard about the foreclosure, about the lawsuit. She wanted to help. She'd kept a journal for years, she said. She wrote about neighborhood happenings, little observations, and in that journal she had entries about me, about how I'd maintained the house, paid the lawn service, hosted block parties. There were entries about Daniel, too, about how he'd moved in 2 years ago, how he'd started making changes without asking me, how she'd noticed tension. It wasn't smoking gun evidence, but it was corroboration. It was a witness who could testify that I'd been the homeowner in every way that mattered. Linda added Patricia to the witness list. We met for coffee, and she showed me the journal. Pages and pages of neat handwriting, dates and details. I was moved. I'd had no idea she was paying such close attention, that someone had been watching and caring. "You were a good neighbor," Patricia said. "You didn't deserve this." I thanked her, hugged her, felt the weight of community, of people showing up, of not being as alone as I'd thought. The day before the trial, I went to visit my mother's grave. I hadn't been in over a year. It was a small cemetery on the edge of town, shaded by oak trees. I brought flowers, yellow roses, her favorite. I stood at the headstone and told her everything, about Daniel, about the house, about how I was fighting back. I imagined what she'd say, probably something about strength, about not letting people walk over you, about family being complicated, but love being simple. I left feeling calm, ready. The trial started at 9:00 a.m. on a Monday. The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. Patricia was there, Simone, Marcus, a few people from the legal clinic, even Dr. Reyes had come to show support. On Daniel's side, there was Melissa, her parents, and a couple of friends. The gallery was split down the middle like a wedding. Team Karen versus Team Daniel. Judge Brennan entered, and the bailiff called the room to order. Linda stood and gave an opening statement. She laid out the case clearly. Fraud, deception, a mother exploited by her son. She painted Daniel as calculating, Melissa as complicit. She promised to show evidence that would leave no doubt about what had happened. Daniel's attorney, a younger man named Vickers, gave his opening next. He portrayed Daniel as a well-meaning son who'd made mistakes, but hadn't committed fraud. He argued that I'd understood what I was signing, that I was now trying to undo a legal transfer because I regretted it. He portrayed me as bitter, vengeful. He mentioned the criminal charges pending against Daniel and suggested I was using the legal system to punish my son for perceived slights. It stung, but I kept my face neutral. Linda had prepared me for this. They'd try to make me look bad, make me seem unreasonable. I couldn't let them see it get to me. Linda called me as the first witness. I walked to the stand, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Then I sat and looked at the courtroom. All those faces, strangers and friends, waiting to hear my story. Linda asked me to describe the day Daniel had me sign the papers. I did. Every detail. The kitchen table, the excitement in his voice, the way he'd pointed to the signature lines, the way he'd said it was just a formality. I explained how I'd trusted him, how I'd never imagined he'd lie. "Did you know you were signing a quitclaim deed?" "No, I thought it was refinancing paperwork." "Did you intend to give your house to your son?" "No, never." "What did you think would happen after you signed?" "I thought we'd save some money on interest. I thought Daniel was helping us, helping me." Linda showed me the text message, asked me to read it aloud. I did. My voice shook, but I got through it. Then she showed me the deed, asked if that's what I'd expected to sign. I said no, said I'd never seen a quitclaim deed before that day at the county recorder's office. Vickers cross-examined me. He was aggressive, pointed. "Mrs. Morrison, you signed 3 separate pages of that deed, correct?" "Yes." "And you didn't read any of them?" "I skimmed them, but I trusted my son's explanation." "You skimmed legal documents that transferred ownership of your house, and you didn't think to read them carefully?" "I trusted him. He's my son." "But that was a mistake, wasn't it? A careless mistake." Linda objected. "Argumentative." Judge Brennan sustained it. Vickers moved on. "Mrs. Morrison, after you signed the deed, did you ever ask your son for proof that the refinancing had gone through?" "No, I assumed it had." "You assumed, but you didn't verify." "Why would I verify? He's my son." "So you made another assumption, another careless decision." I felt anger flare. "It's not careless to trust your child." "Even when that trust costs you your house?" Linda objected again. The judge sustained it again. But the damage was done. Vickers had planted doubt, made me look naive, foolish. Linda called Jessica Phelps next. The notary took the stand looking terrified. She was in her 30s, plain-faced, wearing a blouse that looked too big for her. Linda asked her to describe what happened the day she notarized the deed. Jessica's voice was barely above a whisper. "Daniel Morrison came to my office with the documents already signed. He asked me to notarize them. I asked if the signer was present, and he said his mother had already signed them at home. He asked if I could notarize them anyway. I knew it was wrong, but he was a friend. I did it." "You notarized a document without witnessing the signature?" "Yes." "Do you understand that's illegal?" "Yes, I'm so sorry. I didn't think it was a big deal at the time. I thought I was just helping a friend." "Did Daniel tell you what the document was for?" "He said it was for a family property transfer. He didn't give me details." Vickers cross-examined. "Ms. Phelps, you're testifying here today because you were granted immunity, correct?" "Yes." "So you're not facing criminal charges even though you broke the law?" "That's correct." "And in exchange for that immunity, you agreed to testify against Mr. Morrison?" "I agreed to tell the truth." "The truth as the prosecution wants to hear it." Linda objected. Judge Brennan overruled it. Vickers pressed. "Ms. Phelps, did anyone force you to notarize that document?" "No." "Did Daniel Morrison threaten you?" "No." "So you made a choice, a bad choice, and now you're blaming him to save yourself." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "I'm not blaming him. I'm telling you what happened." Vickers sat down, looking satisfied. Linda called Detective Harris next. He testified about the investigation, the interviews, the evidence, the timeline. He was calm, professional, credible. Vickers tried to poke holes, but Harris held firm. He'd done this 100 times. He knew how to handle a hostile attorney. Linda called Patricia last. My neighbor took the stand and described years of watching me care for the house. She read from her journal, entries about me painting the fence, replacing the roof, hosting Thanksgiving dinners. She described the day Daniel and Melissa moved in, how things had changed, how I'd seemed smaller, quieter, how she'd worried but hadn't known what to do. "Did you ever see Daniel Morrison treat the house as if it were his own?" Linda asked. "Yes. He started making decisions, hiring contractors, changing things. Karen seemed uncomfortable, but she didn't say anything." "Did Mrs. Morrison ever tell you she'd given the house to Daniel?" "No. She always called it her house, right up until the day she was locked out." Vickers cross-examined Patricia too, but she was unshakable. She had the journal. She had the dates. She had the credibility of 18 years as a neighbor and friend. The trial lasted 3 days. Daniel testified on the second day. He admitted to the text message, admitted to telling me it was refinancing, but he claimed I'd known the truth, that we'd talked about it later and I'd agreed to the transfer. He said I was forgetful, that I'd gotten confused. He painted me as aging, unreliable. He actually used the phrase cognitive decline. I wanted to scream. I was 53, not 83. I wasn't declining. I wasn't confused. But Vickers ran with it. He asked Daniel about times I'd forgotten things, appointments, conversations. Daniel gave examples. Some of them were true. I had forgotten things. Everyone forgets things. But Vickers made it sound like I was losing my mind. Linda tore into him on cross-examination. "Mr. Morrison, if your mother was experiencing cognitive decline, why didn't you take her to a doctor?" "I was planning to." "But you didn't. Not yet. In fact, you didn't mention any cognitive concerns until this trial, did you?" "I didn't think it was relevant before. Or maybe you're making it up now to justify your actions." Vickers objected. Judge Brennan sustained it, but Linda had made her point. On the third day, Linda called a surprise witness, Dr. Reyes, my therapist. She testified that she'd been treating me for 2 months and that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment, that I was articulate, clear-thinking, and fully capable of understanding complex situations. It was a risky move. It meant revealing I was in therapy, but Linda thought it was worth it. She was right. Dr. Reyes was calm and authoritative. She had credentials. She had recent observations. She made Daniel's claims look like the lies they were. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I sat in the hallway with Linda and Simone, barely breathing. Marcus brought coffee I couldn't drink. Patricia held my hand. At 4:53 p.m., the bailiff came out and told us the jury had reached a verdict. We filed back into the courtroom. I sat at the table, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The jury foreman stood, a middle-aged woman in a purple sweater. Judge Brennan asked if they'd reached a verdict. The foreman said yes. The judge asked her to read it. "In the matter of Karen Morrison versus Daniel Morrison and First National Bank, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Karen Morrison. We find that the deed transfer was procured through fraud and is therefore void. We further find that the loan issued by First National Bank is invalid. We award Mrs. Morrison full ownership of the property and damages in the amount of $37,000 to cover her legal fees and costs." The courtroom erupted. Simone hugged me. Linda pumped her fist. Patricia started crying. On the other side, Melissa sobbed into her hands. Daniel sat frozen, staring at the table. Judge Brennan banged her gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" She turned to me. "Mrs. Morrison, the property is yours. The bank will release the foreclosure. Mr. Morrison and his wife have 30 days to vacate. Congratulations." I couldn't speak. I just nodded. Tears streamed down my face, but I was smiling. Actually smiling. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. We walked out of the courthouse into the late afternoon sun. A small crowd had gathered, people from the legal clinic, a reporter from the local paper. A woman I didn't recognize approached me. She introduced herself as Helen, a social worker from the Elder Advocacy Office. "Mrs. Morrison, I just want you to know we've been following your case. You fought hard. You won. But this happens more often than people realize. Adult children exploiting their parents. I'd like to talk to you about sharing your story, helping others recognize the signs. Would you be willing?" I said yes without hesitation. If my nightmare could help someone else avoid the same fate, it would mean something. It would matter. That night, Simone threw a small celebration at her apartment. Just a few people. Linda, Marcus, Patricia, Dr. Reyes. We ordered pizza and drank cheap champagne. We laughed. We toasted. We talked about everything except the trial. It felt good to be normal, to be happy. At 10:22 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "Mom, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't change anything, but I am. I'm sorry." I stared at the message for a long time. I wanted to feel something. Forgiveness, anger, anything. But I just felt empty. I typed back, "I hope you learn from this. I hope you're a better father than you were a son." Then I blocked his number. The next day, I went to the house. My house. Linda had gotten the keys from the court. I stood on the porch, holding them in my hand. The wreath was gone. The tulips had wilted months ago, but it was still my house. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. It smelled different, like someone else's cooking, someone else's laundry detergent. The furniture had been rearranged. The walls had been painted a color I hadn't chosen, but it was mine. I walked through each room, touching the walls, the counters, the door frames, reclaiming it, making it mine again. Daniel and Melissa moved out 2 weeks later. I wasn't there when they left. I didn't want to see them, didn't want the confrontation. Patricia told me they'd loaded a U-Haul and driven away early one morning. They left the place clean, no damage, no spite, just empty. I moved back in the next day. Simone helped, Marcus helped. We carried boxes up the front steps, and I felt like I was moving into a new place, not an old one. It was a fresh start, a second chance. I repainted the walls, my colors. I bought new furniture, not expensive stuff, just things that felt like me. I planted new tulips, hung a new wreath, made it home again. The criminal trial for Daniel happened 3 months later. I didn't attend. Linda told me he pled guilty to fraud and notary violations. He got 2 years probation, community service, and a fine. No jail time. Melissa had the baby the week before the sentencing. A girl, Patricia told me. She'd heard from another neighbor. I wondered if I'd ever meet my granddaughter. Probably not. Probably better that way. I kept working at the clinic. I liked the routine, liked feeling useful. The pay wasn't great, but I didn't need much. The house was paid off. My expenses were low. I started volunteering with Helen at the Elder Advocacy Office. I told my story at community centers and senior living facilities. I warned people about the signs of financial exploitation, how to protect themselves, how to ask for help. It was hard at first, reliving it, but it got easier, and people thanked me, told me I was brave, told me I'd help them. One afternoon, about 6 months after the trial, I was at the grocery store. I turned the corner into the produce section, and there was Melissa. She was pushing a cart with the baby in the seat. The baby was beautiful, dark hair like Daniel, big eyes like Melissa. I froze. Melissa saw me and froze too. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Melissa looked away and hurried down the aisle. I let her go. There was nothing to say, nothing that would change what had happened. But I thought about that baby, about how she'd grow up hearing some version of this story, about how she'd wonder about her grandmother, about whether she'd judge me or judge Daniel or judge both of us. I hoped she'd be smart. I hoped she'd be kind. I hoped she'd never have to choose between love and self-preservation the way I had. A year after I got my house back, I hosted Thanksgiving. Not a big gathering, just Simone and Linda and Patricia and Marcus and Dr. Reyes, people who'd shown up, people who'd fought for me. We cooked together, laughed together, ate too much and told stories and watched football on TV. It felt like family, not the family I'd been born into or the family I'd created, but the family I'd chosen, the family that had chosen me back. Patricia brought up Daniel once, asked if I'd heard from him. I said no. She asked if I missed him. I thought about it, really thought about it, and I realized the answer was complicated. I missed the son I thought I had, the boy who'd been sweet and kind and loving. But that person maybe never existed. Maybe I'd built him in my head. Maybe the real Daniel had always been capable of this. I just refused to see it. I miss who I thought he was, I finally said, but I don't miss who he actually is. Patricia nodded, squeezed my hand. We moved on to other topics. I started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee dates with men I met through friends or online. It was awkward and strange and sometimes fun. I wasn't looking for anything permanent, just companionship. Proof that I was still alive, still capable of connection. One man, a retired teacher named Frank, took me to the botanical gardens. We walked through the orchid exhibit, and he told me about his late wife, how he'd cared for her through cancer, how he'd grieved, how he was learning to live again. I told him about Daniel, about the house, about fighting back. He listened, really listened. We saw each other a few more times. It didn't turn into romance, but it turned into friendship. And that was enough. 2 years after the trial, I got a letter from Daniel. It was forwarded through Linda's office. He didn't have my address, and I'd kept it that way. The letter was short. He said he'd been going to therapy, working on himself. He said he understood now what he'd done, how he'd hurt me. He said he didn't expect forgiveness, but he wanted me to know he was trying to be better. For his daughter. For himself. He included a picture of the little girl. She was 2 now, smiling at the camera, holding a stuffed bear. I put the letter in a drawer. I didn't respond. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday I'd be ready to have that conversation. But not yet. The wound was still too fresh, the trust still too broken. I kept volunteering, kept telling my story. Helen and I started a support group for people who'd experienced financial exploitation by family members. It met twice a month at the library. The first meeting, I expected maybe 3 or 4 people. 12 showed up. By the 6th meeting, we had 20. People shared their stories, cried together, strategized together. It was painful, but also healing. We weren't alone. We were survivors. One woman, Margaret, had been exploited by her daughter. Another, Robert, by his brother. Another, Lisa, by her husband's nephew. The details were different, but the core was the same. Someone they loved had taken advantage, had lied, had stolen, and they were all trying to figure out how to move forward, how to rebuild trust, how to protect themselves without becoming cynical. It was hard work, messy work, but important work. I celebrated my 55th birthday with a small party at my house. The support group came, Simone came, Patricia came. We ate cake and played board games and told jokes. It was simple, quiet, perfect. As I blew out the candles, I made a wish, not for Daniel to come back, not for things to be the way they were, but for peace, for the ability to let go of the anger and the hurt, for the strength to keep moving forward. The wish didn't come true overnight. Healing doesn't work that way, but slowly, month by month, I felt lighter. The weight I'd been carrying started to ease. I stopped checking over my shoulder, stopped waiting for the next betrayal. I started trusting again. Not blindly, not naively, but carefully, intentionally. I built boundaries. I asked questions. I verified. And when people showed me who they were, I believed them. 3 years after the trial, Patricia's husband died. A heart attack. Sudden and shocking. I helped her plan the funeral, sat with her during the viewing, held her while she cried. She'd been there for me. Now I was there for her. That's what community means, showing up, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I kept the house. I'd thought about selling it, starting fresh somewhere new, but I realized I didn't want to. The house wasn't tainted by what Daniel had done. It was still mine, still full of memories that mattered. My mother's piano in the living room, the kitchen where I'd baked birthday cakes, the bedroom where I'd rocked Daniel as a baby. Those memories were mine. Daniel couldn't take them. No one could. I refinanced, got a better interest rate, lowered my property taxes by appealing the assessment, made the house sustainable on my income. I planted a garden in the backyard, tomatoes and peppers and herbs. I spent evenings weeding and watering, my hands in the dirt, the sun on my back. It was meditative, grounding. It reminded me that I could create, that I could nurture, that I wasn't just surviving, I was living. 4 years after the trial, I got another letter from Daniel. This one was longer. He told me he'd gotten a job managing a warehouse, that Melissa had gone back to school, that their daughter Emma was in preschool. He said they were doing okay. Not great, but okay. He said he thought about me often, wondered how I was. He asked if I'd be willing to meet, just once, just to talk. I sat with the letter for a week. I talked to Dr. Reyes about it, talked to the support group. Everyone had different opinions. Some said I should go, that forgiveness was important. Others said I should protect myself, that I didn't owe him anything. In the end, I decided to meet, not because I owed him, but because I wanted closure. I wanted to look him in the eye and tell him how his actions had affected me, and then I wanted to move on. We met at a coffee shop halfway between my house and wherever he was living now. He arrived first. I saw him through the window. He looked older, tired. I almost turned around, almost walked away, but I didn't. I pushed open the door and sat down across from him. "Hi, Mom." "Daniel." We sat in silence for a moment. Then he started talking. He apologized, said he'd been selfish and desperate and stupid, said he'd convinced himself he was helping, that he'd justified the lies. He said therapy had helped him see the truth, that he'd hurt me, deeply, unforgivably. He said he didn't expect me to forgive him. He just wanted me to know he was sorry. I listened, didn't interrupt. When he finished, I took a breath. You took everything from me. My home, my security, my trust. You made me feel like I was losing my mind. Do you understand that? Yes. And you did it for money, for a business idea that failed. Yes. You're my son. I loved you more than anything in this world, and you betrayed me. His eyes filled with tears. I know. I'm so sorry. I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Maybe the possibility. I need time, I said. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again, but I don't hate you. I just need time. He nodded. I understand. We finished our coffee in silence. When I stood to leave, he stood too. He looked like he wanted to hug me. I stepped back. Not yet. Maybe not ever, but maybe someday. I walked out of the coffee shop and drove home. I cried in the car, not from sadness, not from anger, from release, from letting go. I didn't see Daniel again after that, but I didn't block his number anymore. He sent a card on my birthday. I sent one back. Small steps, baby steps. I didn't know where it would lead. I didn't need to know. I kept living, kept volunteering, kept building my life. I took a watercolor class at the community center. I wasn't good, but I enjoyed it. I traveled, small trips, a weekend in the mountains, a week at the beach. I'd never traveled much, never had the money or the time. Now I did. I made up for lost years. 5 years after the trial, the support group threw a party for me. An anniversary of sorts. 5 years of survival, 5 years of healing. They made a banner, brought cake, told stories about how I'd helped them, how sharing my experience had given them courage. Helen gave a speech. She talked about resilience, about the power of community, about how one person's fight could inspire others. I cried, happy tears this time. As I looked around the room at all those faces, people who'd become my friends, my family, I realized something. I'd survived. More than that. I'd rebuilt. I wasn't the same person I'd been 5 years ago. I was stronger, wiser, more careful, but also more open. I'd lost a house, gained it back, and discovered it was never about the house. It was about my worth, my right to be treated with respect, my refusal to let someone else define my value. That night, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea. The street was quiet. The stars were bright. I thought about the day I'd stood here, locked out, my key useless in a lock that had been changed. I'd felt so small then, so powerless. But I wasn't powerless. I'd fought. I'd won. And more importantly, I'd learned. I'd learned that family doesn't mean accepting abuse, that love doesn't require sacrificing yourself, that it's never too late to stand up, to fight back, to reclaim what's yours. I turned my key in the lock at 9:36 p.m., and this time it opened smooth and easy, because now this door, this home, this life, they all belong to me. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story with respect and gratitude.